People always want to talk about the villain in a scary story. And listen, I get it. Villains are usually one of the more fascinating characters to explore. They're the ones who commit the violence, create the chaos, and become the very face of the film's brand. But today, I want to talk about a character who actually deserves the spotlight, the unquestionable victim. Because in the past few weeks, I've seen far too many people describe Obsession as a crazy girlfriend movie. But those people are wrong. To me, Obsession really isn't the movie about a possessive partner. It's a film about the horror of Nikki's lost identity, the horror of lost agency, of becoming a version of yourself that you didn't choose. Today, I'm not going to focus on giving you a play-by-play summary of everything that happened in the film. Instead, I want to focus on Nikki's story and how Obsession uses her descent to highlight the horror of losing touch with the one person you're always supposed to be able to count on, yourself. The more I sit with this movie, the more I keep coming back to this idea that the wish itself was dark, and therefore only darkness could manifest from it. No good fruit can come from a poison tree. So Bear's wish is really at the root of all of this. And the reason this story becomes so horrific so quickly is because Bear doesn't simply wish for love. He doesn't wish for honesty. He doesn't even wish for the confidence to tell Nikki how he feels and the strength to accept whatever the outcome may be. Because heaven forbid Bear recognize that real change has to come from himself. No, instead, he wishes to change Nikki. He wishes for her to return his affection. Not just that, but to love him more than anyone else in the world. And that difference matters. Because from the moment Bear makes that wish, Nikki's desire stops being her own. Her affection is no longer hers. Her choices are no longer hers. And that's why the wish itself is dark. It takes something that should only ever be freely given. Love, passion, desire, connection, and forces it into existence. And from that moment on, nothing good can happen. One moment, she's herself. In the next instant, something shifts. Something is overwritten. Something new has taken root. And I think that's the real horror of Obsession. Not just that Nikki is obsessive, but that she's in that state because someone thought so little of her personhood that they simply wished it away. But before we get into Nikki and Bear and the wish that ruins everything, let me introduce myself. Hey guys, it's Gata and welcome to my channel. This is my corner of the internet where I like to sit down and talk about stories, famous faces, and the archetypal patterns that shape the way we move through the world. If that sounds like something you'd be interested in exploring further, I invite you to pull up a chair and join the conversation. I'd love to have you. Before we dive into the darkness and depravity of it all, I think it's really important to take a moment and highlight the person that Nikki was before the wish. Because if we only remember and talk about freaky Nikki, then we miss the tragedy here. Before Bear's wish, Nikki isn't some flat, one-dimensional fantasy girl, although Bear is awfully quick to paint her as that type of caricature. Nikki starts the film as a round, dynamic person. She has a life that she's actively trying to step into. She's finally leaving her dead-end job at the music store to pursue her dreams of writing. The second female lead in the story, Sarah, is also on a similar path, currently awaiting acceptance letters to art school. And so throughout the film, there's this larger theme of young women stepping on the edge of the next chapter of their lives, leaving one version of themselves behind and trying to step towards something that's more authentic. Nikki especially has this very maiden-like quality to her. She's open to possibility. She's pursuing her passions. She's searching for love. making these big life changes in hopes of making her dreams come true. But Nikki's warmth and emotional openness extends so far beyond herself. She's inviting and playful and vulnerable. She's the type of girl who insists on paying for the next round of drinks at the bar, or who remembers that you got cut off mid-conversation and encourages you to finish your thought. She endearingly calls everybody babe and gives money to the homeless man sitting outside the bar. She opens up to Bear in the car and offers him support in return. Even visually, she feels like a real person. Her fashion is layered and unique. She has texture. She has taste. Later on in the video, I'm gonna dive deeper into how Nikki's evolving fashion choices throughout the film show us how deep Bear's possession of her becomes. But for now, the point that I want you to remember is this. Before Bear's wish, Nikki had a life. She felt unfinished and imperfect in the way that real people feel unfinished and imperfect. Not incomplete, but developing, evolving. And that matters. Because this film isn't about a young woman whose true nature is revealed to be monstrous. No, this is a story about a young woman whose true self was stolen. Archetypally, Nikki starts the film in this really interesting space between the maiden and the lover. Remember, the maiden archetype isn't just about innocence. It's about openness to possibility, coming into yourself. It's the part of us that's still standing on the threshold, still dreaming, still hopeful, still imagining a life that's more beautiful than the one that we're currently existing in. And Nikki has that. She's opening herself up to this brand new chapter, trying to become a better version of herself, to be something new. And because of this, she also has an abundance of lover energy. And no, not in the distorted sense of the word love, not yet, but in the sense of desire, emotional groundedness, sensuality, and connection. She's trying, she's open, she's kind of nervous. She wants something more. And let me be clear, there's nothing wrong with any of that. None of it's a problem. The nightmare begins when those qualities stop belonging to her. After Bear makes his ill-fated wish, Nikki changes immediately. Her free will is taken away, and she snaps into another person, like the snapping of the branch of a willow tree. And this is the moment where we meet the character that I refer to as Freaky Nikki. Because let's be very clear, the person that we spend the majority of the film with is not Nikki. The moniker Freaky Nikki is a callback to a painful high school nickname that Bear unsuccessfully tries using as a flirting tactic. And I think this reveals something very clear about the nature of their relationship. Nikki makes it abundantly clear that this is not a nickname that she appreciates, not a time in her life that she finds particularly funny. And Bear's failure to understand that about her highlights that, to him, she was never really a person worth getting to know. Not really. Not in the sense that he understood her past, her history, or her wounds. No, Bear sees Nikki as a means to an end. The manic pixie dream girl that's gonna come in and solve all of his life's problems. But that is not love. That is an idealized, distorted version of happily ever after. It's a love story warped into violation, codependency, hyperfixation, and of course, obsession. But here's the real tragedy in it all. This is an obsession that's been forced upon Nikki in every sense of the word. And that's the darkest aspect in all of this. Yes, Bear is lonely. Bear is insecure, and I feel for him there. Truly, I do. I think we all understand what it feels like to be so painfully uncomfortable in our own lives. But loneliness does not entitle you to someone else's personhood. Before the wish, Nikki was confident and sociable and witty. All of those qualities, those things that make her her, begins slipping through her grasp the moment Bear makes that wish. Suddenly, there's this general emotional instability, tension, an incongruence between her emotions and her actions, an inauthenticity. And everyone around them immediately clocks that something is very wrong, except for Bear, because honestly, Bear is a basket case too. But to everyone else, something is wrong. Nikki is wrong. She lies and manipulates to hold Bear's affection. It all feels forced, performative. As Bear's preparing to leave for work, Nikki tries so hard to cling on to that effortless, cool girl persona that she absentmindedly reads a book upside down. She practices the right expressions, the right tone of voice, the right things to say, not for herself, but for Bear. And don't even get me started on the theatrics at Ian's party. That disturbing Hansel and Gretel monologue. The bold proclamation to everyone at the party that none of them would ever have a connection like what she shared with Bear. The exaggerated pout during Jenga that would put even the crankiest toddler to shame. The way she immaturely pushes Sarah off to the side and readies herself for a kiss with the most over-the-top pucker you can imagine. At first glance, these details absolutely play to the black comedy of the film or the crazy girlfriend trope. But it's also the moment where the comedy starts to curdle into something uglier. Freaky Nikki doesn't feel like a woman who's overcome with love, because she isn't. Instead, she's become the shell of a person, forced to perform a role she never agreed to play. And that performance becomes more unsettling the longer it lasts. Because Nikki isn't simply affectionate. She's trying to fit herself into the mold of what Bear's ideal woman is. The girl who always says the right thing, always wears the right outfit, always smiles in just the right way, forgives any perceived slights. The girl who exists solely to make him feel chosen and worthy. But a fantasy girl is not a person. She's an act, an illusion. And the harder Nikki tries to be Bear's perfect romantic partner, the less human she feels. Few scenes in the movie show this better than the date night scene. Her eyes have this bright, fiery intensity, practically boring a hole through Bear's confused expression. Her shrill, manic wails as she discloses the lie about her father's cancer diagnosis. You can see the tension and pain peeking through the surface as the wish compels her to be exactly what Bear wants her to be. It's that mask of perfection, the painful grin, the emotional inconsistency. It's the understanding we, the audience, have that while her body is saying one thing, her mind is screaming another. Because underneath all of this, the real Nikki is still there, and she can't get out. And again, this is where the movie gets complicated, because Nikki does terrible things, but Nikki's terrible actions stem from a violation that happened before she ever had any choice in the matter. There's a moment at the end of the film where she says to Bear, "I'm sorry you had to see that, but it's kind of your fault. You wanted this, you wished for it." And that line feels like the movie looking at Bear and forcing him to face the difficult reality. He can't pretend that this trauma popped up out of nowhere. He planted it. He wanted it. He wished for it. Something that grabbed my attention immediately the first time I watched this film was the costuming. One of the most interesting ways the movie shows Nikki losing herself is through her fashion. Before the wish, Nikki has a style that feels very specific to her. It's layered and nuanced, cute, but practical. She heads out to the bar in this casual shorts and combat boot combo, finishing it off with this big oversized coat. And how could we forget the crystal necklace that was unceremoniously lost in the toilet? This feels like real identity, authentic and intentional. Not perfect, but real. After the wish, Nikki's clothes stop feeling like a form of self-expression and more of a tool for her to fit into Bear's fantasy. When she confesses her feelings to Bear in that flirty little red dress, we see her embodying the ideal form that Bear wants her to take, the lover. And when she initially adopts that role, on the surface, everything seems fine. Nikki's outfits during the honeymoon era romantic montage seem picture perfect, but also a bit artificial. Too matchy-matchy, almost like she's an actor in a TV commercial. And that's a really effective visual storytelling tool here, because she really is just playing a part, a stand-in for the lifelong role of Bear's dream girl. And then on date night, there's this shift. There's this color mirroring that's hard to miss. Both Nikki and Bear show up to the restaurant in these beige sweaters. Beige, bland, an empty canvas, a blank page. Nothing really going on there. Nikki has officially stopped being an individual. Instead, she's merely an extension of Bear and his deepest desires. Around her neck, she wears a gold initial B necklace, symbolizing his complete ownership over her. She's literally branded by him. Something else that stuck out to me about the fashion was that the longer Freaky Nikki was around, the shorter her shorts got, the more revealing the outfits became, less coherent and styled. What once felt effortless now feels careless. And that's a really important distinction for Nikki's character arc. As she drifts further and further away from her true self, Bear's objectification and possession of her has become increasingly more severe. Her style stops expressing her identity and instead expresses his fantasy. To me, that's really what makes this whole transformation so disturbing. It's not just Nikki acting weird. She's being visually rewritten, disappearing right in front of our eyes. Her changing wardrobe becomes evidence for the theft of her identity. But one of the most telling parts about Nikki's character is this. Despite the effects of the curse, the magic spell that stole her from herself, the real Nikki never really disappears. And that's really what makes this film so tragic. She keeps surfacing, keeps leaking through, keeps trying to get out. Because even in the movies, humans have few psychological needs greater than the need to be seen, to be recognized, to be respected and valued. When Bear calls the One Wish Willow hotline, attempting to amend his original wish, he is horrified to hear real Nikki's ear-piercing screams coming through from the other side. And I'm not gonna lie, the first time I saw this movie, that scene hit me viscerally, like a punch to the gut. Because I think so many of us understand this feeling, trapped within the confines of a life that you didn't choose. And Nikki's screams on the other side of that call echoed the desperation that so many of us have experienced in those moments. The dying need to reclaim your sense of self, your identity, and autonomy. There are a lot of other examples of the real Nikki trying to break through the surface. As she creepily keeps a vigilant watch on sleeping Bear in the darkened corner of his bedroom, her facial distortion feels like a physical embodiment of distorted love itself. There are the not-so-subtle Polaroid selfies in which the real Nikki blatantly writes that the person who's been sharing Bear's bed is not her. The longer the obsession lasts, the more frequently and severely her mask of perfection slips. Nikki's increasingly warped memorials to honor Bear's dead cat Sandy feel like perversions of these very loving, real emotions of care and devotion, transformed into something grotesque and unholy. And then, of course, there's her sleeping nighttime confession. As Freaky Nikki slumbers, the real Nikki is able to break through the surface and talk directly to Bear. And what she says is devastating. She begs Bear to end it all. She makes it crystal clear that she'd prefer no life at all than to continue moving through the world without agency, a shell of her former self, effectively a living doll so that Bear can play out his fantasy. When Bear coldly responds to her request by asking, "What's so bad about being with me?" we catch another glimpse of the real Nikki trying to break through. She responds with maiden-like honesty and openness. Matter-of-factly, she reminds her captor, "I've never been with you, Bear." And that line is really the emotional center of the movie for me, because it highlights the true evil of the story. It's not a monkey's paw, be careful what you wish for situation. It's not some dark, twisted romance. It's not even a dramatic girlfriend story. No, this is a hostage's plea. Despite the seeming hopelessness of her situation, Nikki makes something very clear to Bear. You've captured my body. You've captured my words. You've captured my action and affection. But let's be very clear. You've never actually captured me. I mentioned at the beginning of this video that no good fruit can come from a poisoned tree. And eventually, Bear's wish takes a predictable, violent turn. Nikki turns it toward herself, destroying her beauty, one of the key things that Bear values the most about her, as she mutilates her face at Ian's party. She threatens further self-injury as a manipulative tactic to keep Bear by her side. And then, of course, there's Sarah. Sarah's death is the culmination of Nikki's jealous, unchecked rage. But again, this is where the movie gets more complicated than just, that Nikki is crazy. Because while Nikki is the one acting, she's not doing so from a place of real personal agency. Her body becomes the vehicle for someone else's desire. And let me be clear, that does not erase the gravity of what happened to Sarah. It doesn't make her death any less devastating. On the contrary, I think the fact that both of these young women had their lives stolen from them, just as they were on the brink of stepping into their next great adventure, is one of the most devastating parts of this whole story. But I think it's important for us to remember where this violence truly began. Because while Nikki may have become the face of this violence, Bear's the one who slipped the mask on her in the first place. He wanted this. He wished for it. Nikki continues to remind him of as much, and the movie makes it impossible for us to forget. And this also reveals the deeper underlying truth that Bear just doesn't want to face. He wanted love and desire without freedom and free will. Now he's at the point where he's finding out, to his horror, what the implications of that really are. But that's not the end of the depravity, no. Because by the end of the movie, it's not enough for Nikki to just be Bear's dream girl. She has to absorb the identity of anybody who could potentially take his attention away from her. She goes to perverse and disturbing lengths to co-opt the identity of Sarah, the woman who seems to have caught Bear's eye. She steals the dress off of her lifeless body. She haphazardly scribbles on her tattoos, the tattoos that are the very symbol of Sarah's hope for a new life, now reduced to the streaky, distorted costuming of a woman possessed. For freaky Nikki, it's all just another performance. She takes on Sarah's identity. Even up to the very end of the movie, we see the shadow side of the lover trying to dominate Nikki, lying and manipulating Bear to try and coax him out of the bathroom. She assures him that they can take a break. It's okay if they need space. It's all another act. She's performing tenderness, reason, speaking the exact emotionally resonant phrases that'll get him to come out. Just as Bear is about to make his not-so-grand exit from this whole tragic tale, Nikki makes one final wish, one snap of a willow branch, one final leap for her happy ending, one simple desire from one trapped young woman, wishing for Bear to return her affection. And this is a great mirror, a wonderful bookend to Bear's own original dark, twisted origins at the beginning of the film. And that's really what makes the ending so bleak. Because by the end of the story, Nikki has been so thoroughly warped by the confines of this wish that she's desperately reaching for the same distorted love that destroyed her in the first place. The victim perpetuates the cycle. She uses the same dark magic to force desire and love into existence. And for a moment, the film gives us this morbid fairy tale conclusion, a dark happy ending for all of 2 minutes. But of course, it can't last, because no good comes from a poison tree. The wish didn't create love when Bear made it, and it doesn't create love when Nikki makes it either. It only creates more obsession. And in the end, it's the story's victim, Nikki, the scary movie's proverbial final girl, that's left to deal with the consequences of it all. I think that's really what makes this film so interesting. It's not just a movie about one cursed wish. It's about the distortion of love, about stolen dreams. It's about how the very thing that's all you've ever wanted can become terrifying if the will is not free, especially when it comes to relationships. This movie is about codependency and hyperfixation and possession, but it's also about agency. Because the scariest thing about obsession isn't wanting somebody. It's wanting them so badly that you stop seeing them as a person. Bear just can't handle the messy risk of putting himself out there, of vulnerability, of emotional openness and honesty. But that is not love. That is possession masquerading as romance. And the uncomfortable modern mirror here is that a lot of us do this in small ways too. We fall in love with potential, with fantasy, with the version of a person that's aligned with our deepest hopes and dreams. We want people to choose us, but oftentimes we don't want to deal with the reality of what that choice actually means. It means that they might not actually choose you, that they might change, that they might want something else from life. Your ideal partner could be a very different person outside of the confines of the role that you've assigned to them. On the flip side of that, we can also be guilty of falling into performance too. We become the girl next door, the low maintenance girl, the chill girl, the caretaker, the version of ourselves that we think will finally get us love. But if love requires you to stop being yourself or to stop being authentically yourself, then what's really being loved? Is it you or the performance? So no, I do not think that Obsession is a movie about a crazy girlfriend. I think it's a movie about the horror of losing yourself in someone else's fantasy. Nikki isn't terrifying because she loves Bear too much. She's terrifying because she shows us what love becomes when it's not real. Bear wished for attraction without consent, romance without risk, love without personhood. And the movie follows that wish to its only possible conclusion. Not intimacy, not devotion, and certainly not happily ever after. Just more and more obsession. Because if you have to manipulate somebody into loving you, it's not love, it's a cage. And eventually, whoever's inside will want to break free. So, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Is Nikki the victim, the villain, or something a little more complicated than that? I can't wait to hear what you're thinking about this film down in the comments below. If you'd like to hear another story about a woman losing herself in someone else's perception, I think you're really gonna enjoy my deep dive on Elizabeth I and how she lost her sense of womanhood in her own personal brand. So I will catch you over there, or I'll just see you next time. Until then, take care of yourselves. Bye guys.